Hello, my name's Levi Samuel. In today's video I'm going to discuss why beginning authors should stay away from writing book series. So back when I was starting, I had this mentor he was a published author. He had his foot in with a few publishers, and in many ways I kind of got the start of my career by working with him. He got me my first publishing gig. I got many doors open for me. That's where I got to start going in and working conventions and making many professional contacts that I still have to this day. But one thing that constantly happened, I was always being told what not to do. The thing was, I was never told why. Being kind of rebellious and young and inexperienced, I really needed to know why. Because just telling me not to do something without giving me the reason why, it makes me want to do it all the more. In not knowing why I was doing things, I had no reason to refrain from doing them, other than somebody told me not to. So most of the things I was told not to do, I tried not to do them for the longest time, but eventually I ended up giving into it and learning why I should avoid certain things. And among this numerous list of things I was advised not to do, one of them, probably one of the bigger ones, was to write a series. Now, that seems like a silly thing. Why would anybody want to refrain from writing a series? It's not really that big of a deal. But there's a few key points that I really want you to think about before you consider to actually start writing a series, especially if you're an inexperienced or beginning author. The biggest part of this, you don't have your voice yet. It takes 5 to 6 books before you really start learning your voice. When you're writing a book from the beginning, at least for me, I was writing a book the same way I would watch a movie. I could put the characters where I needed them. I could write the events that were happening, but I didn't have the visual element within my writing to be able to paint the picture. If people were walking through a forest, that's all well and good, but there was no detail as to what color the bark on the trees were, or specific leaves, or if the sky was a specific hue. Those are just details of the setting, but being the type of author that I was writing my stories as if I were watching a movie in my head. And in a movie, a lot of the details are visual aids. You see them because that's what's on the screen. The only real thing that you get from listening to a movie is you get the dialogue and you get background noises and suspense music or mood music. In books, you have all of that, as well as you have to include the visual side of it. And a lot of beginning authors aren't overly good at doing that. That's why you need experience to tell you your voice or to learn your voice. A few of the problems that you're going to have as a young author or an inexperienced author in trying to write a series. Almost all of us, our first book sucks. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no denying it. A first book pretty much always sucks. Now, yes, they can be edited to be better, but especially in the indie publishing world, before you've made contacts and you've found decent prices on good editors, most of the time your book is not going to be edited to the quality that it should be. So a lot of times the first book being put out it's going to be bad. Moreover, because you lack experience, you don't really know how to make the words flow in a manner to make them best suited for the product. If you start writing a series, even if it's a trilogy, if it's more, it doesn't matter. Your first book is probably going to suck. Because your first book sucks, your second book may be slightly better, but it's still probably pretty rough. Your third book, you're getting better, and then any book thereafter, you're progressively getting better. I experienced this with my first trilogy. My original plan, I had 7 books in my head that I planned to get out. The first of those books ended up getting split into 2 books right off the bat. And that happened because my rookie mistake, I hadn't painted enough detail pictures. So I cut the book in half, and I rewrote both halves into a full book, adding just world details to bring it to life. In doing so, I turned one 80,000 word book into two 100,000 word books. And then I was threatened, because I left it at a cliffhanger, I was threatened with bodily harm if I didn't write a third one to finish up the story. Because the plan was, for my 7 books, each of the first 6 were supposed to have been standalones, and then book 7 was going to tie all 6 of the previous books together. That didn't happen. Book 1 became a trilogy. Book 2 became a trilogy. I haven't really written book 3 yet. In all of that, book number 1 was rough, hard to get through. And because it was so hard to get through, very few of the people that actually read that book made it onto book 2. And then because book 2 was still part of my learning curve, even fewer people made it through book 2. And then by the time that I was getting pretty good around book 3, let's say that I had 100 people pick up book 1. Of those 100 people, maybe 10 made it through it entirely. So that means that 10 people are now going to pick up book 2. Book 2 is still pretty rough. Let's say with good numbers that I even retain 50% of those. So therefore, book 3, where it's actually starting to get quality, I only have 5 people going into that. So from the initial 100, I'm down to 5. And honestly, even though those are just example numbers, those numbers are still really far off. It would be more accurate that if 100 people read book 1 and 10 of them got through it, 1 of them would get through book 2 and none of them would get to book 3. And that's just the reality of the world we live in. As an inexperienced author, you are hurting your career by starting out with a series. So it is my recommendation that you begin your career with writing standalones. Write 5 to 6 standalones. Make sure that you have your craft down. Make sure that your voice is solid and you know what you were saying. And then, whenever you have a solid grasp on your career and how you plan to approach things, then consider writing your series once you know what you're doing. Another thing about the series issue, other than the low quality when you're starting out, you're going to have continuity issues. There are details in book 3 that are relevant in book 1. That's another thing I've run into personally. I've had a huge issue that popped up later on that wasn't anything back early on. And because I've already published the earlier book, I therefore cannot go back and change the beginning to make it match where it needs to be. So you're going to have those continuity issues unless you decide to hang on to all 3 books and get them all ready together and then publish 1, 2, 3, so on. When you do that, you can fix a lot of those continuity issues, but for the most part, you're going to be impatient. You're going to put them out as quick as possible. You'll get your first one up while you're working on your second. By the time you get to book 3, you're going to have continuity issues. So, if you can hang on to all 3 and mass release them, really you're going to be better off doing that for your career anyway, because that's going to trigger algorithms that are just going to help. Anyway, that's about all I'm going to say for this video. Please like and subscribe if you want to hear more content from me. I'm planning to put out these videos about every 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next time. Bye.